My name is Julia Carter. I'm 35 years old, and I'm writing this from the back seat of my car, parked behind a 24-hour diner, watching the sunrise bleed through the fog like it's trying to apologize for what I heard last night. I've rewritten this post at least 5 times, but my hands won't stop shaking. I haven't slept. I haven't cried either. Not because I'm strong, but because I think my body is too stunned to remember how. Ethan and I just celebrated our 3-year wedding anniversary last weekend. He made dinner reservations at the same rooftop restaurant where he proposed, held my hand across the table the entire night, and said he was the luckiest man in the world. He looked right into my eyes and told me, "You make everything feel like home." Home. What a joke that word turned out to be. I was supposed to be away this week. My company hosted a 4-day women's leadership retreat in Seattle, something I'd been looking forward to for months. But after 2 days of canceled speakers, cold coffee, and me feeling increasingly restless, I decided to come home early. I wanted to surprise Ethan. He always texted me when I was away. "Miss your face. House feels empty without you. Wish you were here." So I caught the late train back to Portland, stopped at that tiny cafe near Hawthorne he loves, picked up his favorite almond croissants and a bottle of that fancy small batch whiskey he'd been obsessed with lately. I even wrote him a little note on the back of a receipt. "Early surprise for my favorite person. Hope you're not too shocked. Love, Jay." When I got home, I entered through the garage, used the code like always. Our house isn't huge, but the layout's weird. You can't see the living room from the entryway, and the stairs to the second floor are just off to the side. I was trying to be quiet, balancing the pastry box and the bag with the whiskey, smiling like some Hallmark character. That's when I heard his voice. He was upstairs in his office, the gaming room really, but his voice carried down the stairwell. At first, I thought he was just on a call with his old college buddies. He laughed that low, easy laugh I'd fallen for, the one that always made me feel like I was in on something with him. Then I heard it. "It's like being locked in a golden cage, man. If it weren't for her family's money, I'd have walked out months ago. I wake up every damn day regretting this marriage." I stopped. Literally stopped mid-step, my foot on the bottom stair. My ears were ringing. My stomach dropped so fast, I thought I might actually throw up right there, standing in my own home, holding his favorite croissants like an idiot. I waited. Maybe he was joking. Maybe this was some kind of weird venting session that guys do when they're frustrated. But then he kept talking. "Her dad thinks I'm some golden boy, wants to bring me into the family firm next year. Once I'm in, I'll have more options. Until then, I just play the part, man. I'm good at it. Hell, I even got Misty at the vow renewal just to sell it. Oscar-worthy, huh?" He laughed again. Oscar-worthy. That's how he described crying while reading vows to me in front of my family. My parents, my sister, my godmother, everyone got teary watching him talk about our love. And it was all a performance. He called me his retirement plan with lipstick. He said I was easy to tolerate because I came with infrastructure. I don't even remember walking back down the stairs. I know I didn't make a sound. I left the croissants on the kitchen counter, tucked the whiskey bottle behind the toaster like a coward hiding evidence of her own stupidity. I drove until I didn't recognize the neighborhood anymore. Then I found this diner parking lot, turned off the engine, and just sat here for hours. An old man with a cane tapped on my window an hour ago. Asked if I was all right. I told him I just needed a minute. That was a lie. That was the first lie I told tonight. But it won't be the last. Because I'm going back home this morning. At the time, I was supposed to come home. I'm going to walk in, give him a kiss, and act like nothing's wrong. Not because I forgive him, not because I'm weak, but because I need time. Because I just learned that the man I married isn't my partner. He's an actor auditioning for a financial future. And if he can play that game, so can I. I walked through the front door that morning at 10:07 a.m., precisely when I told Ethan I'd be back from the retreat. He was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone like any other Saturday. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Jules," he said, walking over to wrap his arms around me. "You're home." I smiled. I even kissed him on the cheek. "I missed you," I said, lying for the second time in less than 24 hours. He didn't mention the croissants I had left out the night before. He didn't ask about the whiskey either. Maybe he hadn't noticed. Or maybe he just assumed I came home, left again, and never heard a thing. I acted normal, made small talk about the retreat, told him about the spa session I didn't attend, the workshop I never saw. I laughed when he made some joke about how he'd barely survived without me. He touched my waist like he always did, and asked if I wanted to go out to dinner later. I told him I was too tired. That part was true. For the next 5 days, I lived a double life. By day, I went to work, held meetings with clients, smiled at colleagues like everything was fine. By night, I shared a bed with a man who unknowingly confessed he was biding time until he could leave me. It's strange. You think betrayal would feel like fire, but instead, it was cold. A quiet freeze in my chest that refused to thaw. I began watching him differently. Not like a wife watches her husband, but like a stranger studying a liar. Every word, every glance, every casual comment felt like a possible thread I could tug on until his whole performance unraveled. On Wednesday, I left my laptop open in the living room while I got ready for bed. On the screen, my bank account. The private one. The one Ethan didn't know existed. I kept the balance displayed right at the top, bold and clear. The next morning, he was oddly chipper. Made me coffee with almond milk and cinnamon. How I liked it years ago, before he decided I was too picky. He sat across from me at breakfast and asked if my dad had mentioned anything lately about shifting the firm's ownership. I said I didn't know. I asked why. He shrugged. No reason, just curious. Right. That night, I reviewed our shared bank statements more carefully. I'd already spotted a few odd charges, $200 here, $300 there, just under our agreed-upon threshold for discussing expenses. But this time, I started tracing them back. He'd been withdrawing those amounts every 2 to 3 weeks for months. No receipts, no reimbursements, just gone. Was he sending them to Melissa? Funding her rent? Their future? I didn't know, but I intended to find out. On Thursday, I accidentally left a tab open in our browser history. How to protect assets in marriage. When he asked about it later, I just smiled and said I'd clicked the wrong article while reading an interview on Forbes. I could feel the shift in him after that. Just a flicker. But it was there. He started watching me more closely, asking if I was okay, hugging me longer than usual, offering to order in from that fancy Thai place he used to say was overpriced. Little gestures, like he was testing the water to see how cold it had gotten around him. And all the while, I played my role. The devoted wife, the exhausted worker, the clueless fool. But inside, I was mapping an escape route with military precision. The man who called me a retirement plan with lipstick thought I was still dancing to the rhythm of our old life. He had no idea the music had changed. He had no idea the show was ending, and next time the curtain dropped, he'd be alone on stage. By Friday morning, the cracks had started to show. Not in me, but in him. Ethan's questions became more frequent, his eyes more watchful. He started checking his phone constantly, leaving the room for longer calls. And once, just once, I caught him staring at me from the hallway while I pretended to read a novel on the couch. He didn't smile when I looked up. I didn't either. That afternoon, I took the long way home from the office and parked 2 blocks away from our house. I needed a minute to collect myself because I wasn't just going home as his wife anymore. I was going in as an investigator. I entered through the front door like normal, kissed his cheek like always, and told him I was going to take a long bath. He nodded absently, buried in his laptop, probably checking crypto charts or pretending to be busy with work he never really explained. Once the water was running in the bathroom, I doubled back silently and slipped into his office. I hadn't snooped in years. Not because I trusted him, but because I thought I didn't need to. But now I needed to know everything. The first drawer had the usual loose receipts, old USB drives, and a framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Spain. He looked so in love in that photo. I looked so certain. I found the second phone in the bottom drawer, wrapped in a microfiber cloth under a stack of old invoices. A burner phone. He'd even gone so far as to scribble the password on a sticky note and tuck it under the case. How poetic. 3 years married to a man who could remember every player in a fantasy league draft, but couldn't remember his own secrets without a note. I unlocked it. There was only one contact saved, M, and dozens of messages. We're still on track. Just need to keep up appearances. She's starting to act weird. Maybe she suspects something. 2 more years and we're out. Patience, baby. 2 more years. I read that phrase at least 6 times. 2 more years until what? He'd leave me? Take whatever he could and run off with her? Was she just a part of this, or was she the co-architect? One message stopped me cold. After the renewal, it'll be easier. Her family loves the act. Once her dad makes the formal offer, we're set. Formal offer? Oh, God. My father had mentioned, just days before the vow renewal, that he was considering inviting Ethan into a new venture. A side project, but one that could eventually become something permanent. A stepping stone. Ethan had played me, played my family, played the tears at the altar, the soft looks across dinner tables, the affectionate stories he told at gatherings. All of it, scripted. And I had believed every line. I photographed everything, every text, every timestamp, every digital trace. Then I put the phone back exactly as I found it, down to the smudge of dust on the drawer's handle. When I walked out of the office, Ethan was in the kitchen, pretending to scroll his phone while stealing glances at me. I smiled, asked what he wanted for dinner. He said, "Surprise me." I almost laughed. He had no idea the kind of surprise I was preparing. Later that night, while he played online poker in his room with his headset on, I sat in the guest bedroom with a blank legal pad. I began writing. Secure my finances, transfer my jewelry and heirlooms to Marla's studio for a shoot, research legal protections, change all passwords, find a lawyer he's never heard of, wait, watch document strike. I didn't know what the end of this story would look like yet, but I knew exactly how it would not end, with me being the fool. I started waking up before Ethan just to watch him sleep, not in some romantic way, but to remind myself who I was really dealing with. He always looked so peaceful, like someone who had nothing to hide. But I knew better. I knew now that his stillness wasn't innocence, it was calculation resting. On Monday morning, I intentionally mentioned over coffee that my dad had been feeling unsure about a few of his long-term investments. I didn't elaborate, just stirred my drink slowly and said, "Things might shift soon." Ethan's hand paused halfway through his toast. He looked at me a moment too long before replying that the market had been unpredictable lately. It was a test, and he failed it. I went to work but left my iPad open on the kitchen counter with browser tabs showing searches like signs your spouse is hiding money and best divorce attorneys in Portland. When I came back, the tabs had been closed. He didn't mention them. Neither did I. That night, I waited until he was in the shower and then casually checked his sock drawer. It was disorganized, stuffed with mismatched socks and loose change, but something felt off. I found my old bank statement tucked underneath a balled-up hoodie. He'd printed it out, highlighted sections, notes scribbled in the margin. That was the moment I knew he was starting to panic. He called me twice the next day while I was in meetings, then texted 4 more times asking if I wanted to go away with him for the weekend. Just us, somewhere quiet to reconnect. I told him I'd think about it. I met with Marla that night at her art studio downtown. She was the only person I had told everything to, and she didn't say I was overreacting. She said, "Julia, this isn't just betrayal. This is a plan he's been running on you for years." We packed my grandmother's jewelry into her equipment bags and labeled them as photography props. I told Ethan I was letting Marla borrow a few things for a styled shoot. By Thursday, Ethan had become overly affectionate. He brought home flowers, offered to cook dinner, rubbed my shoulders while I worked. But it wasn't affection, it was damage control. He kept watching my face like he was waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I smiled. I kissed his cheek. I asked him to pick up more laundry detergent the next day. That night, I noticed the fridge had started making that same loud clicking sound again. It had been like that for 2 months. Ethan always said he'd fix it when he had time. So I picked up the phone and called a repair service. The guy came the next morning while Ethan was still in pajamas. I told him I figured Ethan was too busy to fix it, so I handled it. Ethan didn't say anything until the guy left. Then he asked if I thought he was incapable. I looked at him and said no, just occupied with other things. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I wasn't. When I checked our joint banking app that evening, I noticed he'd transferred $300 out. Again. No note, no explanation. I didn't say anything. I just screen captured it and saved it to my new email folder marked legal. That night in bed, he rolled over and held me tighter than usual, whispered that he was lucky to have me. I didn't say anything. I just stared up at the ceiling and counted all the lies I'd accepted without knowing they were lies. He fell asleep before me. I stayed awake another hour, thinking. He thought he was in control, but the clock was ticking, and he didn't even hear it. Saturday morning started with sunshine and the smell of fresh coffee, but something about Ethan's smile felt off. Too wide, too practiced. I'd seen that expression before, usually at dinner parties with my parents, or when pitching some idea he hadn't fully thought through. A performance, and now I couldn't unsee the script beneath his gestures. He suggested we take a spontaneous day trip to the coast, said it would do us good. I told him I had errands to run. In truth, I had a meeting with a private attorney Loretta had referred me to, someone outside our family circle, someone discreet. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a quiet, knowing look. I handed her a folder labeled personal with the documents I had spent the last 2 weeks compiling. The text messages, the unexplained withdrawals, screenshots of that second phone. Her eyes didn't widen in surprise as she read through them. That was somehow worse. It meant people like Ethan weren't rare. By the time I returned home, Ethan was in the garage rearranging the storage shelves, a task he'd put off for nearly a year. When I asked what brought it on, he said he just felt like being productive. I smiled and nodded, then went inside to update my private backup folder. That evening, I noticed him hovering near my desk while I was in the kitchen. He didn't see me watching. He leaned in, looked at the screen, and when I cleared my throat from the hallway, he jumped like a guilty teenager. He tried to cover it with a joke, said he was looking for the Spotify tab. I didn't correct him. I let him believe he was still ahead. On Sunday, I found the second phone again. It had been moved to his gym bag. I waited until he went on his usual afternoon run, then opened it with the same password. The messages had grown more frequent, more intimate. One from just 2 nights ago read, "It's getting harder to pretend. She's getting colder. But I'll hold the line. Not long now." Another one, older. From last month. "After the vow renewal, it's smooth sailing. Her dad trusts me. The business deal is next." They weren't just planning to build a future. They were planning it with my money, my family. I sat down at our kitchen table, the one we picked together in that boutique store the year we got married. I ran my hand over the wood grain. It felt different now, hollow. The love I thought we built had become a set. The husband I thought I knew was an actor between scenes. And I wasn't just playing the role of a wife anymore. I was becoming the director. And the climax of this story was coming fast. Monday began with a strange calm in the house. Ethan had left early, claiming he needed to prep for a big virtual pitch. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. After he pulled out of the driveway, I went into his office. Not to snoop this time, just to look. I stood there in the center of the room and stared at the chair where he sat the night I overheard everything. The headset was still on the hook. The same coffee ring stained the side table. It was eerie how normal it all looked, like a stage reset for the next act. By noon, I had completed the transfer of the remaining funds from our joint account into my private account. Small amounts, just like before, barely enough to trigger any alerts. I had the pattern timed down to avoid suspicion. I also emailed Loretta a zip file containing all documentation and a simple subject line just in case. That afternoon, Ethan called me 3 times in the span of an hour. When I finally picked up, I kept my tone light. He asked if I had been feeling distant lately. I said I was just tired from work. He asked if everything was okay between us. I told him everything was fine. He went quiet. Then said he wanted to plan a trip to Mexico for just the two of us. Said it had been too long since we did something romantic. I told him it sounded lovely. He didn't realize I had already canceled my passport renewal last week. That evening, while we were watching a show on the couch, I excused myself to get some tea and saw him unlock my iPad. He scrolled through the search history again, eyes darting fast. I had left a few new breadcrumbs on purpose. Phrases like how to legally separate finances in marriage and signs your spouse is hiding a second life. When he saw me returning, he quickly minimized the screen and pretended to be adjusting the volume. I didn't confront him. I just smiled and handed him a blanket. He kissed my forehead like everything was fine, but his hand was shaking. The next morning, I found him in the guest bedroom closet. He said he was looking for his old leather duffel for a gym trip. That duffel had been in the hall storage for 2 years. I knew what he was really doing. He was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much longer he had. But the truth was, the rope was already fraying beneath him. He just hadn't felt the snap yet. I walked into our room, closed the door behind me, and made a list of everything I would need for the next phase. I had the legal documents lined up, the evidence backed and stored, the support network in place. The last thing left was timing. And soon, I would stop playing the loving wife and start telling the truth. Because I had built a marriage, he had built a plan, and I was ready to tear it all down. The night before the confrontation, Ethan made dinner. Steak, mashed potatoes, the exact meal he cooked the night he proposed. He even lit candles, played the same playlist. Told me I looked beautiful when I walked into the dining room in my old black dress, the one he used to say made me look powerful. He was trying too hard. He poured my wine with shaky hands and asked me about my day in a voice that didn't match his eyes. Halfway through the meal, he looked up from his plate and asked me if I was happy. I took a sip of wine and asked him to clarify. He said things felt different lately, like there was a wall between us, that he missed me even when I was sitting next to him, that he felt like I was slipping away. I looked at him and said, "Maybe you should check your conscience if you feel something slipping." He blinked, tried to laugh, said he didn't understand what I meant. I smiled politely, then picked up my fork and asked if the potatoes had too much salt. He didn't eat another bite after that. The next morning, we met my parents for a routine brunch. Or so Ethan thought. My father had arranged for Mr. Halbridge, our family's financial advisor, to join us in the private room of the restaurant. Ethan greeted him warmly, thinking it was a coincidence. When the coffee was served, my father placed a folder on the table and slid it toward Ethan. He opened it. Inside were printed bank statements, screenshots of messages from the second phone, and a transcript of the call I overheard weeks ago. Every line, word for word. Ethan looked at the papers, then at me, then at my father. He tried to laugh, said it was all taken out of context. My mother didn't say a word, just kept stirring her tea. Mr. Halbridge cleared his throat and explained that Ethan was being removed from all family trust structures, business access, and future considerations, effective immediately. Ethan looked to me like I'd pull him out of it, like I'd step in and say it was all a big misunderstanding, but I didn't. I just sat there and said, "You had 3 years to love me. You spent them plotting." He said I was overreacting, that everyone says things they don't mean when venting, that he had never stopped loving me. I asked him which part was love, the part where he called our marriage a nightmare, or the part where he told another woman to hold on just a little longer until the deal was done. My father excused himself before Ethan could answer. My mother followed. Mr. Halbridge stood and placed an envelope next to Ethan's untouched orange juice. It was the first copy of the divorce papers. Ethan looked at it like it might explode. He said he wasn't going to sign anything until he talked to a lawyer. I told him he had 24 hours to collect his belongings and leave the house. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And for the first time since I came home from Seattle, he stopped pretending. That night, the house was silent. Ethan slept in the guest room. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Not because it was over, but because I was finally free to begin again. And this time, I would write the script. Alone, but honest. The next morning, Ethan was gone before sunrise. I heard the soft slam of the front door, followed by the engine of his car starting in the driveway. When I came downstairs, I found a handwritten note on the kitchen island. It said he was sorry, that he hoped one day I could understand, that he never meant to hurt me. I didn't read it twice. I dropped it straight into the trash. By noon, I had changed the locks. The divorce papers had already been sent to his lawyer, and Mr. Halbridge had executed the financial removals as planned. Ethan tried calling 5 times. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I walked through my house and took a deep breath. It felt different, quieter, lighter. I boxed up the things that reminded me of him. The photo albums, the souvenirs from our trips, even the ridiculous monogrammed towel set he insisted on ordering after our honeymoon. All of it went into storage. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I refused to let them keep their place in my daily life. That weekend, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Smaller, simpler, but mine. Every picture on the wall was one I chose. Every piece of furniture was something I picked for comfort, not presentation. The first night in my new place, I sat on the floor eating takeout Thai food and drinking red wine from a chipped mug, listening to the sounds of the street below. It was lonely, but not the kind of lonely I'd feared. It was honest. It was earned. Over the next few weeks, Ethan tried to fight the divorce. His lawyer demanded access to future earnings from my family's company, claimed Ethan had contributed to the household stability, that he had supported my career emotionally, that he was entitled to more than what the prenup allowed. But my team responded with evidence, recordings, withdrawals, screenshots of messages to Melissa, promising her a future built on lies. After that, his lawyer went quiet. The case settled quickly. Ethan walked away with far less than he expected. Still too much, in my opinion, but I wasn't in it for revenge. I just wanted to be done. He sent me a final message 2 weeks later, said he missed me, that he couldn't sleep, that no one understood him like I did. I deleted it without replying. I started therapy, began painting again, bought myself a bright yellow bike, and rode it through the park on quiet afternoons. I laughed out loud when a stranger's dog jumped into my lap at a coffee shop. I said yes to last-minute dinners with friends, even when I was tired. I told my mother to stop setting me up on dates. She didn't listen, but I forgave her. And one evening, as I unpacked the last of my moving boxes, I found a small canvas I had painted years ago. It was a stormy landscape, all dark blues and charcoal grays. I remembered creating it after a long argument with Ethan. At the time, I had called it tension. I took a brush, dipped it into a clean, warm gold, and painted a sunrise over the clouds. Then I renamed the piece. Resilience. That's the thing no one tells you when your marriage ends in betrayal. You don't just lose the person. You lose the version of yourself that believed. The woman who stood at the altar with full faith. The woman who smiled through dinner, not knowing she was being used. But if you're lucky, and careful, and just a little bit fierce, you find someone new in the ashes. Someone who doesn't smile out of politeness. Someone who doesn't mistake performance for love. Someone who stops waiting to be chosen, and chooses herself instead. That someone is me. And for the first time in a very long time, I'm proud of the ending I wrote.